At 58, I owned 4 houses across the country, an ocean view villa in Miami, a penthouse in New York, a ski retreat in Aspen, and a modern mansion in Los Angeles. I had marble floors, crystal chandeliers, art worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. But on Christmas Eve, I sat alone in a silent Aspen living room, staring at the snow outside, realizing I had no home. My wife had remarried. My daughter hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. My son had legally changed his last name. There was no fireplace warm enough to melt the cold I felt inside. All I had was space. Cold, expensive space. Years ago, I told myself I was building a future for them, working late, flying out on birthdays, skipping holidays. They'll understand, I said. They did. They understood I wasn't coming back. That night, I found an unopened email from my daughter, dated that morning. The subject line, "If you even remember today." My hands shook as I clicked. Today's my birthday. I stopped waiting for you to remember years ago. But part of me still hopes you'll show up. Not with gifts, just show up. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I'd built empires but couldn't remember the last time I'd held her hand. I had everything except the people I built it for. If you've ever wondered whether chasing success is worth losing your family, keep listening. My story might save yours. I was born in Akron, Ohio, in the winter of 1967, the kind of winter where the cold cuts through your coat and into your bones. My earliest memory isn't a birthday party or a warm kitchen table. It's the back seat of my father's rusted-out Buick, wrapped in my mother's coat, while she cried silently in the front seat. We had lost our apartment that week. For 6 nights, that car was our home. Growing up like that carves something into your bones, something hard and unrelenting. I told myself even before I hit double digits in age that I would never let my future children experience what I had. Cold, hunger, shame. I worked every job I could from the moment I turned 13, mowing lawns, bagging groceries, cleaning the back of gas stations. My high school years weren't about prom or parties. They were about survival. But I had one escape: books. Economics, psychology, biographies of self-made men. I devoured them. They gave me a blueprint, a way out. I earned a partial scholarship to Ohio State, and the rest I covered with loans and a night shift at a factory. It was there during my second semester that I met Emily. She was smart, driven, and saw through every layer of bravado I wore like armor. She was studying English literature, loved rainy days, and made coffee taste like a conversation rather than a necessity. Somehow, amidst all my plans and ambition, she became my anchor. We dated for 3 years, both too broke for fancy dinners but rich in late-night talks and handwritten notes. I still remember the day I proposed at the park bench where we'd first shared our dreams. I didn't even have a ring then. Just a promise that I'd build a life where she'd never have to worry. We got married right after graduation. No honeymoon, just a quick ceremony and a rented apartment with peeling wallpaper and squeaky floors. But we were happy. Genuinely, deliriously happy. Back then, success meant paying rent on time and having enough left over for Chinese takeout on Fridays. We didn't care about wealth. We cared about each other. Emily got a job teaching high school English, and I landed an entry-level role at a mid-sized financial firm in Cleveland. I wore second-hand suits and took the bus for the first 6 months. But I showed up early, stayed late, and learned everything I could. When our daughter Lily was born 2 years later, I cried like I had just been handed the universe. I held her in that hospital room and thought, this is it. This is why I work so hard. 3 years later, our son Jacob arrived, loud, chubby, and full of life. We had moved into a modest 2-bedroom home by then, with a tiny backyard and neighbors who actually smiled when they saw you. Life was chaotic, sleep-deprived, and utterly beautiful. I coached Lily's t-ball team, read Jacob bedtime stories, and every night before bed, kissed Emily goodnight and whispered, "We're doing okay, right?" And we were. At least then. Looking back, that period was the only time I truly had balance, when my dreams and my reality were aligned. I had a family I adored and a job that supported us. I didn't crave more. I didn't need it. The hunger from my childhood had been satisfied, and for a while I believed that was enough. But contentment is a fragile thing. It doesn't take much, just one promotion offer, one compliment from a senior partner, one taste of what more could feel like. That's how it begins. Not with greed, but with a desire to protect, to provide, to ensure your kids never know the back seat of a Buick. I started staying later at work, just a few hours here and there. Emily understood. "We'll make it work," she'd say with a smile that masked concern. I told her it was temporary, just until we got ahead, just until the next milestone. But milestones don't end. They multiply. And somewhere in that climb, I forgot what I was climbing for. The call came on a rainy Tuesday. A senior partner I'd met during a finance seminar in Boston reached out with an offer: assistant investment director at one of the most aggressive firms in New York City. Bigger firm, bigger salary, bigger future. Emily and I sat at the kitchen table for hours that night, the offer letter between us like some forbidden fruit. "It's a 3-year contract," I told her, hopeful. 3 years, and we grind, we save, and then we move back and finally breathe. She nodded slowly, placing her hand over mine. "Only if we're still breathing together by then." We moved to Manhattan 6 weeks later. Emily gave up her teaching job. Lily started kindergarten in a city she didn't understand. Jacob was still in diapers, too young to miss home, but Emily wasn't. The new job was a whirlwind: morning calls with London late-night updates from Tokyo. I thrived in the chaos, absorbing everything, earning trust, managing portfolios worth more than our entire town back home. I told myself this was for them. For Emily, for Lily, for Jacob. I missed Jacob's 3rd birthday that fall. A last-minute strategy meeting ran overtime. Emily sent me a photo, Jacob wearing a crown chocolate on his cheeks, holding a sign that said, "I'm 3." I stared at it in the back of a cab, my phone buzzing with emails I hadn't yet answered. "It's okay," Emily said when I got home at midnight. "He had fun. We saved you a piece of cake." The next year, I missed our anniversary, an emergency client dinner. I had flowers delivered to her school along with a handwritten note. 3 years, remember, almost there. She didn't reply. I told myself it was because she was busy. But 3 years passed. I renewed the contract without telling her. I justified it with the numbers: our savings had tripled. We could afford a second property, maybe even that beach house in the Carolinas. I promised myself I'd break the news gently. Instead, she found out when a colleague mentioned my new office lease in Midtown. That night was the first time Emily didn't come to bed. I heard her in the guest room, pacing, crying quietly into a pillow. I didn't knock. I didn't want to face the questions I didn't have answers to. Weeks turned into months. I started measuring time by quarterly earnings instead of family events. Lily stopped leaving drawings on my desk. Jacob didn't wait up for bedtime stories. The silence crept in, subtle at first, then louder than any argument. Emily tried. She really did. She planned weekend trips, family dinners. "Let's go apple picking," she said one Saturday. I told her I'd join them at noon. I showed up at 4. They were already home. Jacob was asleep. Lily barely looked up from her book. Emily didn't say a word, as I walked in. She just handed me a grocery bag of apples and went upstairs. Somewhere during that 4th year, I stopped noticing the photos on the walls. They'd started disappearing. First the one from our wedding, then Lily's first day of school. Eventually, only professional headshots remained framed proofs of my success. But success has a cost. My father-in-law's birthday was in April. He and Emily were close. He'd always treated me like a son. That year, he invited us to his 70th birthday dinner. I RSVP'd, yes, bought a custom bottle of wine, even ordered a tailored suit for the occasion. I didn't make it. A last-minute market crash meant a 16-hour strategy session. I called at 9 p.m. Emily didn't answer. I left a voicemail rehearsed and formal. "Tell your dad I'm sorry. I'll make it up to him." He passed away 5 months later. I never did. I remember sitting in that same office watching the city lights flicker like stars and wondering when I stopped being part of their world. I wasn't the husband Emily married. I wasn't the father I promised to be. But I was successful, at least on paper. And that seemed to be enough. Until it wasn't. By my 50th birthday, I had crossed every finish line I'd once dreamed of. The firm made me CEO after a brutal 3-year internal competition. Forbes named me one of the top 50 power executives under 55. I gave keynotes in Shanghai, toasted champagne in Paris, and negotiated 8-figure deals before lunch. I'd become the man I promised Emily I would be. We owned 4 properties now. The New York penthouse with a view of Central Park, a minimalist glass house in LA, a beach retreat in Miami, and the Aspen estate, Emily's favorite, or at least it used to be. Each house was perfectly staged, meticulously maintained, and utterly lifeless. I came home from a week-long summit in Switzerland to find the Manhattan penthouse unusually quiet. Not just physically, but spiritually. Her scent was gone. Her shoes, her books, her laugh. The walls didn't echo with silence, they swallowed me whole. I assumed she'd gone to the Aspen house to breathe. She often did when the city became too much. I didn't call. I didn't check. I just texted, "Let me know when you're ready to talk." No reply. 2 days later, I got an email from our estate lawyer. Subject: Property Separation Draft. Emily. Attached was a 24-page document detailing division of assets, scheduled mediation, and a statement prepared for over 2 years per client request. I stared at the screen, breathless. 2 years Emily had been planning this while I was celebrating awards, giving speeches, shaking hands, and cashing bonuses. I thought she was just tired, overwhelmed, maybe even depressed. But she had been preparing her exit, silently, carefully, deliberately. I called her. Voicemail. I called Lily. Voicemail. Jacob didn't even have my number saved anymore. His voicemail said, "If this is Dad, don't." I flew to Aspen unannounced. The house was empty, cold. Her clothes were gone. Her favorite chair in the reading nook was missing. The blanket she used every winter wasn't folded on the couch. Even the family photos had been removed. Only one remained tucked between cookbooks in the kitchen drawer. A photo from our 10th anniversary, both of us grinning, wine glasses raised. She had handwritten on the back before the silence began. I sat down at the breakfast table, the same one where I'd once mapped out our dream retirement, and realized I couldn't remember the last meal we had shared there, or the last time she'd laughed in this house, or the last time I looked at her and saw her not just a fixture in the background of my life. I poured myself a drink whiskey, neat, and walked through the house like a ghost in his own museum. Every room was furnished with things I'd bought, but none of it meant anything. My wardrobe screamed success. My bank accounts overflowed, but I had never felt more impoverished. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old messages. The last one I'd sent her months ago was a forwarded link to a Wall Street Journal article about my firm's IPO success. "No, how are you? No, I miss you. Just thought you'd want to see this." She never replied. I tried emailing her again, writing a longer message this time, apologizing, asking to talk, promising things would be different. I hit send. Seconds later, I received an auto response. "This inbox is no longer monitored." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the irony was too sharp to cry. I'd built a life where even my apologies had nowhere to land. Days passed in that Aspen house. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't answer emails. I just sat and thought and sat some more. One morning I found a notebook buried in the kitchen drawer. Emily's handwriting filled the page's journal entries, mostly from 2 years ago. One entry read, "He doesn't see me anymore. He sees schedules, deadlines, headlines. I think I'm disappearing in his world, or maybe I already have." I closed the book. My hands were trembling. I had everything I ever wanted. 4 homes, influence, power, my name in magazines. But as I stood in the echo of my own success, I finally understood I had built a kingdom and exiled everyone I loved from it. In the months after Emily left, I still clung to the idea that it was temporary, that she just needed space, time, clarity. I told myself it was a break, not a breakup. I'd go back to Aspen or Miami or wherever she was and we'd talk, work it out. That was how things worked in business issues, negotiations, resolution. Marriage couldn't be more complex than that. But Emily didn't wait around for me to fix things. She didn't even ask me to try. Instead, she re-enrolled in law school. At 47, she walked back into a classroom filled with students half her age and began again. She moved into a small apartment near campus, drove a used Toyota she'd bought with her own savings, and took back control of her life with a kind of grace and fire I hadn't seen in years. She stopped signing emails with Love M. They became formal, factual. Custody schedules, school fees, health updates. Her sentences were short, her tone neutral. Not angry, just done. Lily by then was in her 2nd year at art school in Chicago. Her Instagram used to be full of sketches and family photos. Slowly, the drawings became darker, abstract, faces without features, homes without doors. Then she stopped posting altogether. I sent her a message once, "Your new work is powerful. Proud of you." She liked the message, never replied. Jacob was a junior in high school, playing guitar, building robots, once dreaming of MIT. We used to build Lego cities together. Now when I texted, the bubbles stayed blue, unread, or ignored. One Saturday, I flew back to New York, hoping to surprise them. I brought gifts, new camera lenses for Lily, a signed guitar pick for Jacob, a small diamond bracelet for Emily. I had no plan, just guilt and desperation. The apartment was quiet when I knocked. Emily opened the door slowly, blocking the hallway behind her. "I wasn't expecting you," she said. "I know, I just wanted to see everyone. They're not here." That wasn't entirely true. I could hear faint music, Jacob's playlist. I looked over her shoulder. He was there. Just not for me. "Can I come in?" I asked. She hesitated, then stepped aside. The place was warm but unfamiliar. No trace of the life we once shared. Different furniture. New photos on the wall. A diploma frame hung proudly near the kitchen. her name. First-year honors. Jacob nodded at me from the couch, but didn't pause his game. No hug. No eye contact. I placed the gifts on the dining table. You didn't have to bring anything, Emily said. I wanted to, I replied. Why now? I didn't answer. I didn't have one. Dinner was awkward. Forced. I asked about school music, their summer plans. They answered politely, briefly, like they would a stranger asking directions. At one point, I reached to pour Jacob more water, and he flinched just slightly, as if the gesture was foreign. After the meal, I offered to help with dishes. Emily declined. We've got our routine. I stood in the hallway, coat in hand, watching them clear the table together. They laughed at something. An inside joke I didn't understand. A rhythm I no longer belonged to. When I left, no one asked when I'd be back. That night in the guest room of my New York penthouse, I realized something terrifying. They were learning how to live without me. And they were doing it well. I tried harder after that. Called more. Sent thoughtful texts. Arranged deliveries, flowers, food books. I even signed up for a parenting podcast. But their replies remained surface level if they came at all. One evening I logged into Facebook and saw Lily had removed me from her friends list. Jacob's profile had no photos of us. Emily had changed her status to single months ago. It felt like death by 1,000 digital cuts. Still, I kept pretending. One weekend I visited the Aspen house alone. I told myself it was a reset, a chance to reflect. But the silence was brutal. Every room echoed with the absence of laughter, footsteps, voices. I wandered from kitchen to den to bedroom like a trespasser in my own memory. On Sunday, I made pancakes, Jacob's favorite. I sent a photo of the plate to the group chat. Miss you guys. Breakfast isn't the same without you. No response. An hour later, I saw a post on Emily's page, 3 of them at a farmer's market, smiling. The caption, "Sundays are for fresh starts." I sat down at the counter, staring at the cold pancakes, and finally said the words out loud. They don't need me anymore. The warning signs weren't subtle. They were loud, persistent, and heartbreaking, if only I had paid attention. One morning between meetings and market updates, my assistant handed me a thick envelope. "From your wife," she said quietly. I looked at the handwriting. Emily's unmistakable cursive, but tucked it into my briefcase without a glance. I had a lunch meeting to prep for a boardroom to command. That envelope stayed in my briefcase for weeks, then migrated to a drawer in my home office. I found it months later, unopened, slightly bent. I almost tossed it out, thinking it was a card or some old document. When I finally read it, it was too late. She'd written, "We need to talk. Not about bills or the kids, but about us. I miss you. I'm scared I've already lost you. But I want to try if you do too." I sat there staring at the page, a hollow ache spreading through my chest. The letter was dated nearly a year before she left. I missed my chance. Lily had always been the expressive one. From the time she was little, she turned her feelings into art. One day, Emily sent me a photo of a drawing Lily made in middle school, a family of 3, mother, daughter, and younger brother, standing in front of a house. The father was a ghost, transparent, fading into the background. The title at the top, "Invisible Dad." I never asked about it. I complimented the technique and moved on. There were other signs. Emily stopped asking me how work was. She stopped texting during the day. Our calls were logistical soccer schedules, dentist appointments, tuition reminders. Her voice, once playful, now sounded like a receptionist reading from a script. Jacob began pulling away too. He used to write me emails filled with questions about space and science. He once built a model of the solar system and named a planet after me. But over time, the messages grew shorter, then stopped altogether. I blamed teenage mood swings. It's just a phase, I told myself. What I didn't know, what Emily later told me, was that Jacob had cried himself to sleep the night I missed his robotics competition. He had stayed up late building his project, asked me to review his presentation. I promised I would. Then I left town for a merger meeting. He won second place. I never called. But the deepest wound came from something I never saw coming. It was Emily's friend who told me first over coffee in a quiet corner of a cafe. She looked uncomfortable, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. "You should know. There was someone else." I froze. My first instinct was fury, betrayal. The thought of another man near her, near my children, twisted in my gut like a knife. But then she continued, "It didn't go far. Nothing physical. She ended it before it could. She said she couldn't do that, not while she still loved you. Still loved me." Those words landed harder than anything else. Not because she'd almost left me emotionally for someone else, but because even then, despite the pain I caused her, she was still hoping I'd come back. Emily later admitted it when I finally found the courage to ask. It had been a neighbor, a kind man, who helped with groceries, listened, laughed at her jokes. "He made me feel seen," she said. "But I never let it become more. I couldn't. Because it was you I wanted to see me. And I hadn't. For years." There were no dramatic fights, no screaming matches or slammed doors, just quiet exits, missed cues, pauses too long to fill. 1,000 moments I could have noticed, but didn't. I once walked into our bedroom to find Emily reading a book alone. I kissed her forehead and said, "Everything okay?" She looked at me, eyes tired. "You never ask me what I'm reading." I laughed. "I figured you'd tell me if it mattered." "It always matters," she whispered. I changed the subject. "Even our therapist?" "Yes, we tried counseling." Briefly warned me. After our third session, Emily excused herself to use the restroom. The therapist looked at me and said, "You don't need to work harder, Mr. Callahan. You need to be present. There's a difference." I never went back after that. The signs were everywhere. They weren't subtle. They weren't hidden. I just didn't look. It came in a plain white envelope delivered by courier, left at the front desk of my office tower, like any other legal document. At first I thought it was something routine, maybe paperwork for an acquisition or an update on a contract. But when I opened it and saw Emily's name at the top, my breath caught. Petition for dissolution of marriage. No warning, no phone call, no handwritten letter like before. Just clean, precise language and a signature that used to be scrawled across birthday cards and anniversary notes. There was a sticky note on the last page, her handwriting small and steady. "I used to love you more than I loved myself. But there's no me left to love you with." I didn't cry. Not then. I couldn't. I was too stunned. I sat in my office with the blinds closed, phone off, door locked, staring at that note, reading it over and over. It didn't feel real. But it was. It had been real for a long time. I was just the last one to realize it. 2 days later, Lily texted me. It was her first message in months. "Dad, please don't come to my graduation. It'll just make things more awkward. I hope you understand." I didn't. I wanted to reply, to beg, to say I'd be quiet, sit in the back, not even approach her. But something in that message just made things more awkward, cut deeper than a shout ever could. I didn't respond. Not because I agreed, but because I didn't know what to say that wouldn't make it worse. My world was collapsing, and still I went back to work. A week after receiving the divorce papers, I had my annual physical. Standard corporate policy. The doctor frowned at my blood pressure, asked about chest tightness, stress levels, sleep patterns. I laughed it off. He ordered additional tests. 3 days later, I got a call from his office. "Your EKG was concerning," he said. "I'm referring you to a cardiologist. As soon as possible." I thanked him, jotted the number down. Then I looked at my calendar. The hedge fund conference in London was that weekend. Keynotes, networking, potential clients worth hundreds of millions. I didn't cancel. I told myself I'd follow up after the trip. Just a few more days. One more event. One more opportunity. In London, I stood on stage in front of hundreds, the spotlight warm on my face, applause echoing. I gave a flawless speech. I shook hands. I smiled for photos. That night alone in my hotel suite, I woke up at 3 a.m. with a tightness in my chest that made it hard to breathe. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, thinking not of the clients I'd met that day, but of Emily's sticky note, of Lily's message, of Jacob's silence. And I realized something terrifying. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid that if I did, no one would notice, that my funeral would be attended out of obligation, not love, that my children would grieve a stranger. But I still didn't pick up the phone to call the cardiologist. I flew home, buried myself in quarterly reports and market forecasts. I ignored the chest pain, the headaches, the sleepless nights. I told myself I was just tired. Jet lag, dehydration, too much caffeine. The truth was, I'd already started dying long before that diagnosis. I died a little the first time I missed Jacob's birthday. I died again when Emily stopped laughing at my jokes. When Lily asked me not to come to her graduation, another piece of me went cold. And now, with a failing heart, and no one left to call, I was more ghost than man, haunting the ruins of a life I'd built, without noticing the foundation had cracked. The point of no return wasn't loud. It wasn't a screaming match or a door slamming shut. It was a whisper on yellow paper. It was a quiet text. It was a choice I made when I chose a conference over a cardiologist image, over health pride, over people. I didn't know it then, but I had already crossed the line. And everything after that would be about learning whether there was any way back. I was in Hong Kong presenting a new investment strategy to a room full of international clients when my phone started buzzing. First, once, then again, then 6 times in a row. I glanced at the screen, Emily, then Jacob, then Emily again. I silenced it. I was mid-pitch, the stakes high. A billion-dollar partnership hung in the balance. I told myself I'd call back in 20 minutes, maybe 30. I smiled, gestured at a slide showing exponential growth curves, talked about long-term returns and portfolio diversification. 27 minutes later, I stepped out and returned the call. Emily picked up on the first ring. Her voice was raw, shaking. "Jacob's in the hospital," she said. "Car accident. The other driver ran a red light. He's in surgery." I couldn't speak, couldn't think. "They've been trying to reach you for over an hour," she added, her voice rising. "He kept asking for you, over and over." "Where's Dad? Is he coming?" I was already pulling up flight schedules. I canceled the rest of the trip and boarded the first plane home. 17 hours. That's how long it took me to reach him. By the time I arrived, Jacob was out of surgery, but unconscious. Tubes in his nose, bruises along his arms, a bandage over his forehead. He looked so small in that bed, my son, who had once stood on my feet to dance in the kitchen, now lying silent in a hospital room I should have walked into hours earlier. Emily sat next to him, her face pale and tight. She didn't look at me when I entered. "I'm here," I said quietly. She didn't answer. A doctor came in shortly after. He's stable now. Lucky considering the impact. But the trauma, both physical and emotional, is serious. I nodded, my mouth dry. When will he wake up? Hard to say, the doctor replied. He asked for you, by the way. Right before he went under. Kept repeating it. My knees buckled. I sat in the corner, unable to meet Emily's eyes. Later that night, when she finally spoke, her voice was a whisper. He was coming home from his therapy session. He's been going for 6 months. What therapy? I asked. She looked at me then. Cold, tired. For depression. Anxiety. He didn't want you to know. He said it wouldn't matter to you. I opened my mouth, then closed it. There's more, she continued. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. They found this in his backpack. It was a note, written in Jacob's handwriting. My name was in the first line. Dad, I know you're busy, but if you find this, it means I couldn't wait anymore. I'm sorry I wasn't good enough to make you show up. I'm sorry I wasn't interesting enough to compete with your job. I just wanted you to be proud. I really tried. The rest blurred through tears I didn't realize were falling. I dropped the letter on the floor and buried my face in my hands. He hadn't been trying to get home. He had been trying to leave. If the driver hadn't run that red light, I might have come home to a funeral. The next morning he stirred. His eyes fluttered open and he looked around slowly. Hey, buddy, I said, rushing to his side. He blinked, confused. You came? My voice cracked. Of course I did. His lips twitched into the faintest frown. Took you long enough. Emily didn't say a word. She just stood behind him, hand on his shoulder. I wanted to believe that this was a second chance, that he'd forgive me, that I could make it right. But looking into his eyes, I didn't see relief. I saw disbelief, distance, pain. And something inside me broke. The kind of break that doesn't bleed, but scars forever. 3 days after Jacob woke up, the doctor cleared him to go home. Not with me, with Emily. I offered to help carry him to the car. He refused. Didn't even look at me. At the elevator, I placed my hand on his shoulder. Jacob, turned, eyes red and wet with fury. Why did you even have kids if you didn't want to be a dad? The hallway fell silent. A nurse passing by stopped mid-step. Emily's jaw clenched. But I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I begged you, he continued, voice cracking. I called you, texted you, drew pictures, left notes. You didn't come to games, to concerts, to the goddamn hospital when I needed you most. I opened my mouth, desperate to explain. I was trying to give you a future. No, he snapped. You were giving yourself a legacy. That's not the same. Emily stepped in between us, not to protect me, but to protect him. That's enough, she said softly, but Jacob wasn't done. You don't get to cry now. You don't get to feel bad. You weren't there. Not when I won my science fair. Not when I got dumped last year and wanted to talk. Not when I stood in front of my bathroom mirror with a bottle of pills in my hand. That last part hit me like a freight train. I staggered back against the wall, the air sucked from my lungs. You almost died, I whispered. Because I already felt dead, he said. Emily's hands were shaking. She gently guided him into the elevator. Just before the doors closed, he looked at me, eyes hollow. I don't need your apology. I needed your presence. Years ago. The doors slid shut. I didn't go home. I walked for hours through the hospital parking lot, down unfamiliar streets, past cafes filled with strangers who didn't know me, didn't know what I'd done. That night, Emily called. "Come to my sister's house tomorrow," she said. "Everyone's going to be there." Everyone, Lily. Jacob. Rachel. Rachel, my sister. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. When I arrived the next day, the air in the room was cold, despite the late spring sun pouring through the windows. Lily sat on the couch, arms crossed. Jacob leaned against the fireplace. Rachel stood near the window, hands in her pockets. Emily sat at the dining table, staring into her coffee. "Why am I here?" I asked, already knowing. Rachel answered, "Because we need to say things you've ignored for too long." I turned to Lily. "You too." She didn't look up. "You didn't come to my graduation." "I wanted to," I began. She cut me off. "You weren't wanted. That's the difference." I turned to Jacob, but he avoided my gaze. I looked at Emily. Her voice was measured, like she'd rehearsed. "You spent years building a life that didn't include us. You thought gifts and vacations could replace dinners and hugs. You can buy beds with silk sheets, but you can't buy warmth." I didn't know how bad it had gotten, I said. Rachel finally stepped forward. Her voice didn't waver. "You missed Mom's funeral. Did you know that?" I stared at her, stunned. "I thought it was the following week. It was on the calendar." "She asked for you. Kept asking right until the end." I closed my eyes, my stomach churning. She died thinking her only son didn't care enough to say goodbye. Silence fell. I sank into the nearest chair, hands trembling. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I worked hard enough, succeeded big enough, everything else would work out. "You thought wrong," Emily said flatly. Lily finally looked at me, her voice quieter than the others, but no less sharp. "You always said we were your why. But when we needed you, you were somewhere else." Jacob stood. "We're not trying to punish you, Dad, but we can't keep pretending you didn't leave us long before Mom filed those papers." I nodded, tears now free-falling. "So what now?" Emily's voice softened just enough to let hope peek through. "Now you decide if you want to fight for what's left. Not with money, not with promises, with actions, with time, consistently." "And if I do?" I asked. Rachel spoke last. "Then maybe, just maybe, we'll believe you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat alone in the guest room at Rachel's house, staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me, the hum barely masking the echo of my children's voices from earlier. Their words clung to the walls, refusing to fade. At 2:17 a.m., I opened my laptop and started scrolling through old folders, photos, videos, things I hadn't touched in years. I found a file named Christmas 2009, Aspen. I clicked. The screen lit up with laughter. Emily in a red sweater, flower on her cheeks, baking cookies with Lily. Jacob, barely 4, dancing around in footy pajamas, waving a wooden spoon like a sword. I was behind the camera, narrating, laughing. My voice was different, then warmer, closer. Present. I watched 5 more videos. Birthdays, backyard water fights, bedtime reading. Moments I had lived through but forgotten. Then I found a file labeled Lily, 6th grade project. It was a video diary for school. She sat in her room explaining her project about family dynamics. Her voice was soft, serious. "I love my family," she said. "But sometimes it feels like Dad is just a picture on the wall. I write him letters, but I never send them. I just put them in this box." The video ended. I stared at the screen. A box. I called Lily the next morning. She didn't answer, but an hour later I received a message from Emily. She said you can come by her apartment. She'll be out, but you can wait if you want. I went. Her apartment was small but filled with life plants art books. On the desk, a wooden box taped shut with a post-it note that read, "If you're finally ready to read." I opened it. Dozens of envelopes. Different colors, sizes, dates. The earliest one was from 2011. "Dear Dad, I got an A on my math test. I wish you'd been there when I showed Mom. Dear Dad, I drew a picture of us today. You were wearing a cape. I miss when you used to tuck me in. Dear Dad, I don't know how to talk to you anymore. You're like a guest in our lives." Each one was a wound. Some sealed, others never finished. Some pages tear-streaked. All filled with a child's desperate hope. I read every single one. By the time I finished, I was crying ugly, full-body sobs. Not the silent tears of regret I'd shed in boardrooms or during flights. This was different. This was grief. Grief for the years I lost. For the birthdays I missed. For the drawings I never saw, the dances I never attended, the conversations that withered before they began. I sat on her couch until sunset. When I finally stood, I made a decision. I flew back to Aspen the next day. Walked through the halls of that vast, beautiful, empty house. It was filled with everything except love. I called my real estate agent and listed it immediately. Then I drafted my resignation letter. 30 years in finance, 2 decades at the top. I typed effective immediately. I didn't call my partners. I didn't warn the board. I just hit send. I sold the car, canceled the speaking tour, shut down the consulting contract. For the first time in my adult life, I had no meetings, no deals, no agenda, just time. I sent one message to Emily, Lily, and Jacob. "I've stepped away from the life I built without you. If there's still time, I'd like to build one with you instead." There was no reply. But for once, I wasn't looking for one. This wasn't about what they would do next. It was about finally becoming the man I should have been long before. The offer came in 2 days after my resignation, made headlines. An international firm based in Singapore, looking for a senior strategist to oversee a new global initiative. $10 million over 3 years, plus equity. Travel, prestige, legacy. I stared at the email for a long time. $10 million. A younger me would have already been on a plane. The version of me that missed school plays, forgot anniversaries, and answered phones during childbirths. That man would have called it an opportunity I couldn't pass up. But I had already passed on something far more valuable, and I wasn't going to do it again. I wrote a reply, a thank you for the offer. But I'm choosing a different legacy now, one that doesn't come with stock options. Then I opened my inbox and began typing another message, this one to my former staff. A personal apology to every single person I'd mentored, promoted, or overlooked. I taught you how to chase deals. I should have taught you how to chase balance. I modeled ambition without boundaries. That was my failure, not yours. I hope you'll find what I didn't until now, success that doesn't cost your soul. Some replied. Some didn't. That was okay. Next, I did something I'd thought about for years, but never acted on. I bought back our first real home. The 2-bedroom house in Cleveland, where Emily and I first brought Lily home from the hospital. The one with the leaky faucet and the lilac bush she planted in the front yard. The house had been renovated, repainted, modernized, but the bones were the same. I called Emily that night. "I bought it," I said. Silence. "Our house, the first one. The lilac bush is still there." She didn't respond right away. When she finally did, her voice was careful. Why? Because it's where we were happiest. Because it's the only place I ever truly showed up. And I want to start showing up again. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m., made pancakes and scrambled eggs, Jacob's favorite, and took a photo of the plate. I texted it to both kids. Breakfast is served. Wish you were here. No reply. The next day, I did it again. This time, French toast and strawberries. On the third morning, I made waffles with blueberries in the shape of a smiley face. I sent the photo with a note. Still here. Still cooking. At first it felt silly, performative maybe. But it wasn't about the pancakes. It was about presence, routine, persistence. I had spent decades thinking grand gestures would solve everything. Now I was learning that small, consistent acts held more power than any apology or gift. That Friday, I got my first reply. From Lily. The blueberries look a little creepy, but the effort's noted. It wasn't warmth, but it was contact. I responded, they were supposed to be eyes. Clearly, I need help with presentation. No reply. But the next morning, I sent another photo anyway. That weekend, I mowed the lawn at the Cleveland house, replanted the garden beds, and replaced the broken porch light. A neighbor stopped by Mrs. Hadley, who used to watch Lily when Emily and I worked late shifts. You look different, she said. I am, I told her. Took me long enough. At night, I sat on the back porch and listened to the silence, not the cold, empty silence of a penthouse suite, but the kind that feels like peace. I thought about the life we almost had here, the life we might still rebuild. I wasn't expecting miracles. I wasn't expecting forgiveness on command. I just wanted to make space for healing, for reconnection, for grace. So I kept cooking, kept texting, kept showing up even if no one knocked on the door yet. And every morning before the sun fully rose, I whispered the same thing to an empty kitchen. I'm here. I'm still here. The first time Jacob came to the Cleveland house, he didn't even step past the porch. I'd invited him for breakfast. He showed up an hour late, helmet in hand, earbuds still in. I opened the door, smiling. Made your favorite, blueberry waffles. He glanced past me into the house, then looked me in the eye with a stare I couldn't read. Lily said, you're trying, he muttered. I am, I said. Yeah, sure. Just like you did last time. And the time before that. I started to reply, but he cut me off. Is this another phase, some guilt-driven redemption tour? You think a few homemade breakfasts are gonna erase everything, no? I said softly. I don't think it'll erase anything, but I'm hoping it's a start. He exhaled more like a scoff than a sigh. You're always starting things, Dad. You just don't finish them. Then he turned, walked down the steps, and rode off. That night, I didn't cook. I sat in the kitchen with the untouched waffle batter and stared at the clock. Every tick sounded like judgment. Every silence proof that maybe he was right. The next day, I sent Lily a message, rough morning. Jacob came by, didn't go well. She replied, that's on you. You earned his doubt. Keep showing up. A week later, I called Emily. She answered on the third ring. I saw Jacob, I said. I know, she replied. He told me. Said you seemed earnest. That's good, right? She paused. It's a start. But I'm not ready to bring him back into a cycle of disappointment. I've seen what that does to him. I'm not going to quit this time, I said. She didn't respond for a few seconds. Then I've heard you say that before. I've also watched you choose work every single time it mattered. I swallowed. I've stepped away from all of it, Em. Completely. And I want to believe you. But I've built a life where I don't have to wonder anymore. Wonder if you'll show up. Wonder if we matter enough. I get that, I said. I really do. She softened slightly. Prove me wrong. That night, I sat with my guilt like it was a guest at the table. It didn't leave. It didn't comfort me. But at least I wasn't pretending it didn't exist. 2 days later, while browsing community boards online, I found a local group, Fathers Disconnected, a support circle for dads trying to rebuild bonds after years of absence or estrangement. I hesitated. Groups like that were for broken men who'd failed. And then I realized that was exactly who I was. The first meeting was held in a church basement. Fluorescent lights, metal folding chairs, coffee in a styrofoam cup that tasted like cardboard and regret. There were 6 of us. A bus driver who hadn't seen his son since prison. A construction worker whose daughter stopped speaking to him after a messy divorce. A man in finance like me who missed every milestone until his son stopped inviting him. Each one shared their story. Each one owned their failures without excuses. When it was my turn, I stood slowly. My name is Thomas. I was a CEO. I built a company. I bought 4 homes. I made millions. And in the process, I lost everything that mattered. No one flinched. No one judged. I sat down. One of the men, Marcus, leaned over and said, "Welcome to the real hard work." I went back the next week, and the next. We talked about our blind spots, the lies we told ourselves to justify the neglect. We shared small wins texts, replied to coffee dates with kids, moments of grace. It didn't fix anything, but it reminded me that I wasn't alone. One evening, Marcus said something that stuck. We think we need to prove we've changed, but what our kids want most is to feel we won't disappear again. That night, I wrote Jacob a letter, not a text, not an email. I told him about the group, about my regrets, about my commitment. I told him I didn't expect forgiveness, but I would earn trust inch by inch, day by day. I left it in his mailbox. No reply came. But the next week, a pair of beat-up sneakers sat by the front door when I came downstairs. Jacob was at the kitchen table scrolling on his phone. "I figured I'd try your waffles again," he said, not looking up. "But don't mess them up this time." I didn't smile, didn't celebrate. I just got to work. It didn't happen all at once. There was no movie montage, no dramatic turning point. Just 1,000 tiny choices made day after day. Show up, stay present, keep quiet when tempted to defend, speak when it mattered. Jacob came back the next weekend. Not for waffles, but to ask for help on a street art project he was planning with a few classmates. Something about reclaiming neglected neighborhoods through mural work. "I need someone to help with supply costs," he said, "and maybe to hold a ladder." I didn't hesitate. "I'll hold the ladder." We spent 2 Saturdays on a back alley wall near a rundown youth center. He and his friends designed a piece called Voices Unseen, a vivid mural of faces blending into cityscapes, each one carrying a speech bubble with silent thoughts. "Do you see me? Do I matter?" Jacob didn't talk much while we painted, but he let me be there. He didn't flinch when I passed him brushes. He even laughed once when I dropped a can of blue paint on my shoes. After the final coat dried, he handed me a small card. "Thanks for showing up," it said in his handwriting. "Let's see if you can keep it up." It was the most honest contract I'd ever signed. A few days later, Lily called. She had a photography assignment due for her final portfolio and needed help scouting locations. "You're still decent with lighting, right?" she asked. "Back in the day." "Still decent," I said. We drove through the city, stopping at abandoned buildings and old train stations, places she said had emotional texture. I carried her gear, adjusted reflectors, waited patiently while she chased light. She didn't talk much at first either. But around the third location, she said, "I used to imagine you helping me with this stuff." I looked at her, unsure how to respond. "Now I don't have to imagine," she added, raising her camera. She took a photo of me adjusting a tripod. "That's called documentation," she said with a smirk. "In case you disappear again." "I won't," I said. Later that evening, we reviewed her shots over pizza. She paused on one, a close-up of me holding her camera bag, my face half-shadowed, half-lit. "This one's my favorite," she said. "It's the most honest." I asked why. "Because you look like someone trying. And that's more than we ever got before." A week after that, Emily caught a stomach bug. It wasn't serious, but enough to knock her out for a few days. When Lily called to tell me, I didn't ask if she needed help. I just showed up. I made soup, changed sheets, restocked her meds, sat on the couch while she dozed on and off. The second night she stirred and whispered, "You don't have to stay, I know," I said. "That's why I'm here." She didn't respond. But she didn't ask me to leave either. On the third day, she was stronger. She came downstairs, wrapped in a blanket, and found me folding laundry. She watched for a while, then said, "I didn't think you remembered how to do that." "I had to relearn," I admitted. We sat together, quiet. Then she stood, disappeared into the hallway, and returned holding a small, worn shoebox. "I found this last week," she said, placing it on the coffee table. I opened it slowly. Inside were dozens of folded papers, letters I'd written her in college, scrawled with blue ink, some smudged, others yellowed with time. Notes from the early years of our marriage. Apologies. Love confessions, jokes, promises. I kept them, she said. Even when I was furious. Even when I was done. I picked up one, the first letter I'd ever written her. "I'll build you a life so safe you'll never have to flinch at storms again." I looked up at her. She shrugged. "I guess I was always waiting for you to become that man again." I placed the letter down. "I'm trying." "I know," she said. "This time, I believe you're trying for the right reasons." There was no kiss, no dramatic reconciliation. Just a quiet moment between two people who'd nearly lost everything and were starting piece by piece to find it again. Snow fell gently over the Cleveland neighborhood, layering the rooftops and sidewalks like icing on a cake. It was Christmas Eve, 10 years since our last one together as a full family. 10 years since laughter echoed through the same walls that once held silence and regret. But this year, the house was alive again. Emily arrived first, arms full of groceries, scolding me for forgetting cinnamon. "It's not Christmas without cinnamon rolls," she said, and I smiled like a man hearing music for the first time in years. Lily followed, camera around her neck, snapping photos of the tree I'd spent the entire week decorating. She critiqued the lighting, of course, but didn't remove a single ornament. Jacob walked in last, earbuds in, dragging a duffel bag, his eyes scanning the living room before settling on me. "Smells like Mom's lasagna," he said. "It is," I replied. "I helped." He raised an eyebrow. "Define helped." I grated the cheese. He laughed, an actual warm laugh. Then he walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Merry Christmas, Dad." It was the first time he'd called me that in years. I had to blink a few times before answering. "Merry Christmas, son." Dinner was chaotic in the best way. Lily made everyone wear paper crowns. Jacob played old carols from a Bluetooth speaker. Emily told the same story about our first burnt turkey. I carved the roast without cutting myself, which felt like a personal miracle. After dessert, Lily plugged her phone into the speakers. The opening notes of our wedding song drifted through the room, soft, melodic, familiar. Emily stood, extended her hand. "Dance with me," I froze. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it. She tilted her head. "Unless you've forgotten how." I stood slowly, took her hand. Not a chance. We moved to the center of the living room, our bodies swaying in slow rhythm. The song wrapped around us like a memory, warm, fragile, forgiving. "I never thought we'd be here again," I whispered. "Neither did I," she said. "But I'm glad we are." I looked over her shoulder. Lily was filming us smiling. Jacob pretended not to watch, but his grin gave him away. We didn't say much more. We didn't need to. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone by the tree. Lights twinkled in the branches. Stockings hung by the fireplace, one for each of us, even me. 10 years ago, I'd spent Christmas in a mansion, staring at snow through glass, and wondering why everything felt so hollow. Now I was home in a smaller house with older furniture and more love than I deserved. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a note I'd written earlier that week. This is what wealth feels like: forgiveness. Connection. Presence, not things, not titles, just time with the ones who matter most. I placed the note under the tree not for anyone else to read, but as a reminder to myself. My journey wasn't over, but for the first time I wasn't walking it alone. 6 months after that Christmas, I stood backstage at a TEDx conference in Chicago, a small lapel mic clipped to my collar. My palms were damp, my heart, a steady drumbeat in my chest. Not because I was nervous to speak, but because this time what I had to say truly mattered. When my name was called, I walked out to a modest round red carpet and looked into the sea of faces, some young, some old, some weary, all curious. I used to think success was measured in square footage. I began. I had 4 homes: New York, Miami, LA, Aspen. Each one a monument to ambition. But none of them felt like home. I paused, let that truth hang. Because home isn't a building. It's not where your assets sit. It's where your people are. And I lost mine chasing everything else. I told them my story, the missed birthdays, the unopened letters, the morning I read my son's goodbye note in a hospital waiting room. I spoke of failure, of regret, but also of grace, of second chances, of waffles on cold mornings and tiny texts that broke a long silence. I started a foundation recently, I continued. It's called Fathers First. We provide counseling, legal resources, and support groups for dads trying to reconnect with their kids after years of absence. Because I know how hard it is to show your face when you've been the one missing. There was a hush in the room. I smiled softly. I had 4 homes, but in the end I chose one. The one with my children in it. The one with my wife who gave me 1,000 chances before finally walking away. The one I had to fight, to earn back not with money, but with time. The applause began slowly, then swelled. I stepped off stage not feeling triumphant, but whole. That night I flew back to Cleveland. Lily picked me up from the airport. She was quiet for most of the drive, eyes focused on the road, hands steady on the wheel. I watched the live stream, she said finally. "Oh," she nodded. "You didn't cry. Didn't need to. I've done enough of that already." We both laughed. When we pulled into the driveway, she didn't get out right away. She turned toward me, her eyes suddenly glassy. "I'm pregnant," she said. The words hit me like a wave, but not of panic, of hope. I couldn't speak, just blinked at her. "I wasn't sure if I wanted kids," she said. "For a long time I was afraid I'd repeat the cycle. But then you changed." I looked at her overwhelmed, and now she continued. I want my kid to know their grandfather, the version of you we have now, not the one from before. This one. Tears welled up quietly this time. She leaned over, hugged me tightly. I want my child to have the kind of grandfather I wish I'd always had. I held her as long as she'd let me. In that moment, I understood what legacy really was. Not wealth, not reputation, but impact measured in second chances, in morning breakfasts, in letters finally answered. Not in what you leave behind, but in who you become when you finally come home,